When I saw Maddie and Kristinas dance for the first time yesterday, I told them how well I thought they captured the spirit of today's gospel lesson from the first chapter of Luke. Their choreography echoes the ups and downs and the joys that these women feel and their deep longing for a better and brighter future for their two sons. So I can't thank you enough, you two, for sharing your gifts with us and for being quite literally willing to take a leap of faith and bring dance into worship here with us. Seeing you move through this story is a powerful reminder, I think, of how young and vulnerable and yet how courageous and strong Mary was when she took her own leap of faith and said yes to the angel Gabriel, calling her to be the mother of Jesus. We always knew Mary was a teenager, but somehow seeing it, that physical presence that you provided helps us to see the miracle of the incarnation, what it means literally for spirit to become flesh. Here we see the beginnings of new life in a young woman, new life that in Jesus Christ would be born and live and move finally among us with grace and with power. Last week, I know Pastor Jen talked about how brave Mary was when she heard the news from the angel that she had the dubious honor of being chosen as an unwed mother to bear the baby Jesus. And that was happening in a time that was quite less open and affirming to that kind of thing than we might be today. We look back on the angel's annunciation now through the kind of rose-colored glasses of 2,000 years of faith history and look at Mary through what I've called the many layers of Bible varnish we have over our image of her, those portraits that we carry in our hearts from paintings and Christmas cards. We forget how she was literally risking her life by having a baby in what she calls her lowliness. That simple word low doesn't really begin to tell the story of how she could expect to be treated in her culture. She could have been set aside by Joseph, and if he had decided to make a public example of her, even her own parents may not have been able to save her from a public stoning in the square. So this dance, for me, put real flesh on the harsh reality of a girl's life in those times. It helped me to appreciate Mary's reaction to her pregnancy when she runs off to the southern hills of Judah to be with her relative Elizabeth. I could feel her joy as they danced, but it was a bittersweet joy. I'm guessing that for many of you, it may have also evoked a kind of deep, impossible yearning that we all have as human beings, both to connect somehow with the divine and also to connect to our own human story, a part of God's story of salvation, something better and greater than ourselves. That continues to be the call of Christians, especially here at Christmas as we celebrate Jesus' birth. We're called not to just dance in the sunshine of springtime, but to rejoice in the cold and dark, sparkling darkness of a winter's night. That was the call to Mary and Elizabeth, and later to the shepherds and the kings, and still later, now, to us. I love what the great philosopher and psychologist Rollo May had to say about the difference between simple happiness and true lasting joy. I thought it was important enough once upon a time that I had it posted on the bulletin board in my office when I did youth and campus ministry. Young people especially, I think, need to be directed toward the meaning of life, but all of us do. He says, joy rather than happiness is the goal of life. Joy is the emotion which accompanies our fulfilling our natures as human beings. It is based on the experience of one's identity as a being of worth and dignity. So joy comes not from the pursuit of happiness and not from the things the tyrants of this world would have us believe are most valuable and most important: social status and wealth and power. But joy comes from saying yes to God, from hearing and fulfilling our sacred callings as children of God. We know joy when we know our own natures as divinely created beings, as servants of God, helping not just ourselves, but all of God's children find meaningful lives of worth and dignity. So Mary and Elizabeth, I'm guessing, instinctively knew this truth about joy. We don't know exactly how Elizabeth was related to Mary, but Catholic tradition would say that she was cousin Elizabeth, that Elizabeth was the daughter of the sister of Saint Anne, who was supposed to be Mary's mother. Luke just calls her a kinswoman, but whatever the relation, we know that Mary must have needed to get away from home long enough to make sense of what would lay ahead for her in her new life. And she must have known that Elizabeth was someone who could give her good advice and true comfort. Both of them would have known that they had a rough road ahead, one impossibly old and the other impossibly young. But neither of them could have known fully what dangers their sons would face. Those two boys would grow up to lead a prophetic rebellion against the religious hypocrisy of their own nation and against the dictatorship of a mighty Roman Empire. I just think about what impossible hopes these two mothers must have passed on to John and to Jesus to inspire them to be such amazing leaders of their people.